A few viewers have asked me to recommend some great books for people who are starting out, for beginners, if you like, who are starting out with history to read to get a better sense of history. In my course on mindful history that I'm bringing to my Substack soon, I do recommend a couple of great books for beginners that sort of tell vibrant stories and are really great for beginners, including these two here, Lenin on a Train by Catherine Merridale and The Brilliant Last Miguel by William Dalrymple. Wonderful, wonderful storyteller. It will change your sense of just how dramatic history can be. But I don't want to sort of make specific book recommendations in this video because, in a way, it's that old motto of you can teach someone, you can give someone a fish or you can teach someone to fish. So what I want to suggest in this video is give you 10 tips for how to find your own better book recommendations that interest you and deal with the questions you're most concerned about with history, how history can help you deal with your concerns in the current world. So I'm going to give you 10 sources for where you can get new ideas to choose something different, to choose a better history book that will help you understand the world better. First of all, you can go to the bestseller list. You can look at Amazon or whatever online bookseller you'll have. You could even check out Substack and look at their leaderboard on history Substacks and find some writers on history that way. That is a great idea, and it will point you to things, books that satisfy a lot of people, but it will tend to give you the most popular, the most mainstream, the most, I guess, conventional books on the whole. Sometimes bestsellers are real breakthrough books. Sometimes they're actually just sort of rehashing old stories. The second thing you can do is to look at some big names. Yuval Noah Harari. Lots of people have watched my video about Yuval Noah Harari. Most people in the world know about him. 40 million people have bought his book. And there are other big names out there, Neil Ferguson, Victor Davis Hanson, those kind of people. Tom Holland from the Rest is History podcast. I don't know if there are many historians who are household names. Harari is perhaps one of the few, but you can certainly try starting with them. They're big names for a reason. They're addressing questions that matter to many people. They might be the questions that matter most to you. A third source is to use the mainstream media. Like there are talk shows that historians appear on. There are journalists who write history. There are sometimes historians spoken to on documentaries and news channels talking about current events. So when they appear, take a note of their name and look them up on Google and find their most recent books. And if they are of interest to you, then you might want to find them that way as well. And certainly in recent times, historians have been breaking through into explaining current events. Think of Timothy Snyder or Serhii Plokhy. There's been a lot of discussion of history in recent times around the big dramatic events of the world, the sort of world-shaking changes in the world. Again, those will often give you good ideas, but they also often have their imitations. Often the people who appear in a big media or in journalists like Anne Applebaum, etc., often have an axe to grind, and they're not so much serving, I guess, in a more scholarly way. They're sort of serving the open inquiry about the past. And I've talked a bit about some of the faults of those kind of historians. in some videos on the channel previously. You could also go, and this is the fourth tip, to independent media. You could go to the Burning Archive YouTube channel. I've reviewed a lot of books on this channel, and there are, I think, some great book recommendations there, including some great interviews with historians, most of whom I think are suitable for beginners. So check out my book recommendations playlist for starters. But there are, of course, many other independent media channels on history. There are alt history media channels, some of whom do refer to important books to discuss. And I would just urge everyone to treat some of those old history channels with a fair degree of caution. Again, they often have personal obsessions or axes to grind, which I think distort their perspective and don't really help you answer the questions you want to ask about the past, don't help you actually empathetically connect with the real voice of the past rather than the opinions of the person who is really approaching history as a thing to have a lot of opinions about. The fifth source of things are podcasts, whether they're on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you consume your podcasts. There have been some real hit history podcasts over the years. There's the History of Rome podcast, which was incredibly successful, and that has spawned all sorts of others, looking at the history of the Byzantine Empire, or the history of Russia, or the history of China, the history of India, all sorts of different places. So check out your podcasts, and often those sort of channels will refer to some of the books that they use to get a sense of things. And often just listening to their narration of the events will give you a kind of mental framework to then read some more detailed books with it's like watching the movie before you read the book. You've got the basic arc of the story in your mind. So those kind of podcasts can be a really good source for book recommendations. But also podcasts like the Rest is History podcast, although they sometimes have their faults, they often have fantastic guests on. Rana Mitter's been on, Christopher Clark has been on the Rest is History podcast. I would look through just their list of episodes and look at their guests, and if their topic interests you or sparks some curiosity for you about the history of that part of the world or that sort of issue, follow up their books. I think the Rest of History guest list is a really great source for ideas for good quality current written history. And that's partly also because the Rest is History podcast it's basically an entertainment podcast, I think, and they tend to have people on who are good storytellers rather than dry as dust academic historians. What about option 6? Well, option 6, I'd say, is films and documentary films. The History Channel obviously produces a lot of documentaries about history. Way too many documentaries about World War II, in my opinion. But those documentaries will often have they'll interview historians. They'll have consultant historians who might be listed in the credits. So that can be a good source. If that issue in the documentary interests you, then you can follow them up that way. The same applies to films. If you watch a film on a historical topic, think Napoleon or Gladiator or Vikings, you often see a consultant historian identified in the credits. Sometimes films like Napoleon will provoke discussion in the press about how they got their history so wrong, and in those discussions you will see the names of historians whose books you probably will get a better understanding of history from than you might get from the film. So films and documentaries can also be a great source of building your recommended reading list for history. Then you could go the more formal study route. You could do a course. You could enroll at a history course at university, although for most viewers of the channel, that might not really be an option anymore. It might be a little bit expensive. There are also history courses online. I know a few years ago, I did a free course through, I think it was the Coursera platform, with Jeremy Adelman from Princeton University. A fantastic course on global history, which I don't know if it's still around, but I would highly recommend. So you can do those kind of courses. Some are free, some are also paid courses. University courses may not be so accessible. And I certainly offer some guides to history on my Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. So why not go over there, subscribe, and explore what might be of interest to you. So if you don't want to do a course, if you don't want to commit to a course, you just want to find a good book. One other thing that I've done over the years is go to like a prestigious university history department's website, like let's say the Cambridge University, which is I think acknowledged by many people as one of the top university history departments in the world, certainly the English-speaking world, and they will often list their course guides and reading lists, or their reading lists for people to prepare a study in history. So these can often give you a quick list of some topics and that you may not have ever thought about. You might have said, wow, people write history about that, do they? Or some more current or more authoritative or more expert guides to reading history. And I think that can actually be a great source. And, you know, if you're interested in Indian history, I'd go to a quality Indian university rather than necessarily the University of Cambridge. And maybe the same applies to American history as well. So course guides, university reading lists and course guides, where you can get them, and they won't all be available to you, but you might be able to find things like that. And I've certainly got a lot of great ideas for reading books over the years from those. Then finally, you could join a book group or book club. There are lots of people out there who join book groups. Most of those book groups tend to focus on novels, occasionally some non-fiction. Some might even focus on history. And I've actually developed a kind of online book club myself, really, partly through this channel where we do talk about books on history, but also through my Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. And if you really want, I think, the best way to sort of learn some recommendations, it's great to actually find a trusted person who can, guide you in a, friendly, not teacherly sort of way to make your own discoveries in history. And that's what I try to do at the Burning Archive, both on the YouTube channel and Substack. So if you'd like to join as a paid subscriber where you can get more of my guides to history, or even as an Angel of History member where you can have monthly live call discussions with me about issues with history, literature, culture, or whatever is concerning you, then go to jeffrich.substack.com and join me then. And I hope I'll see you again in another video soon.